right, hi guys, and welcome to this video where we explain really quickly how you can do an interview shot with AXIBO. Now, we're going to use the tracking features to get up and going instantly. It's going to be really quick. It's really cool. Our setup, we've got a camera, we've got an HDMI output going into AXIBO so that we can track from the camera itself. We also can track from AXIBO's camera as well though. And in this case, we're using the high torque slider, just so I can show you guys what happens when we lift up the slider. But for an interview shot indoors in a tight area, you probably want to use the quiet slider instead. So just keep that in mind. All right, so let's take a look at the app and I'm just going to launch this and go, and then I'll explain how it works. So we're going to go to interview on the app. We've already connected. We're going to go to interview with tracking. So we want to use the tracking feature so we don't have to do any setup. And then it says select a subject to track. Well, first thing I'll do is I'll turn on the camera so that we actually have someone to track. And what you can see is the HDMI feed showed up, and I'm just going to click on him and I'm going to click start track. And now what we're doing is we're tracking Peter while the slider is moving. So we're already going. So the slider is going to move back and forth over its full range while we look at Peter and while it stays tracking on him. So what you're going to notice is that while I'm talking, the slider is going to be going back and forth and we're going to be looking at him. And what I'll do is I'll zoom in a little bit as well, just so it gets a little bit more tight, or what you might expect for an actual interview shot. And some of the things you'll notice is that if we lose him during tracking, or if anything like that happens because of lighting, it regains him really well. It's really cool. So that was it. That was like 3 button pushes and we're rolling. So let's explain what's going on here. So we have our pan, tilt, and slide. Now these can be enabled and disabled. In this case, this is usually the best. We don't want to track on tilt. We just want to keep tilt fixed. It's not usually very good unless the person's walking around. And the slide we definitely want. The slide is what gives us that great, parallaxing effect behind him. We can change the speed of the slider, so we can go faster. This just depends on what it is that you're trying to accomplish with your shot. The next thing is offsets. On the offset page, we can change the framing. So if I want him maybe lower in my frame, that's a bit ridiculously low, but I can move him around where I want him in my frame, and he's going to stay there as the camera moves. So you'll notice this camera's been going back and forth and it's still just pointed at him. Then what we can do is we can go to settings, and in settings we can change the speed that our pan moves at. Now this is very important. If you notice that the footage seems jittery, it's probably just because your pan speed is too high. So make sure to turn the pan speed down to something reasonable. If the person's talking and moving around a lot, you may want to turn the pan speed up so that AXIBO keeps up. So if he's moving side to side, what you'll notice is that the camera will adapt to that a lot faster. Now, one other thing to note is that if you want to track something that's moving a lot faster, use AXIBO's integrated camera. It tracks a lot faster than any HDMI output from a camera will, and it's very useful. So that's it. When you're done with interview, you can hit the stop button and you're done. And then that was interview with tracking. Now, what we'll do is we'll also talk about how to do interview with keyframes. If you've watched our keyframes video, you can probably guess what we're going to do. So we're going to go to interview, and we are going to go to interview with keyframes. And what we want to do is we want to set up some positions. So here what we can do is we'll just set this as one position, and then I'm going to go to another position here. So I'm going to move down a little bit, and I'm just going to keep him where I want. And I'm just going to keep this really mini so that we don't have to wait for anything. Okay, so I'm going to set this one, and then I'm going to delete this one because we don't need a third one. And so you can see that I've got my 2 positions for my interview set up. Normally I'd go to one end of the slider and then the other end of the slider, but in this case I'm just going to do this little mini one. I'm going to go to controls, and I'm actually going to go to my first one. So I'm just going to hold down on it to go to, and that's just going to move me to my first position, very similar to keyframes. And then once it's there, we can run it, and it's just going to run in a loop and go back and forth on that fixed position. So if you have someone who's very static, or you're filming from further away with a wider lens and you don't want the tracking because you just want it to repeat all day while different people come and sit down, and you don't want to worry about starting and stopping tracking, this is a great feature for that. And then so once it's there, I'm going to hit the play button, and now it's going to run just back and forth, tracking him as we go. But if he was to get up and leave, the camera is not going to follow him, and we can just keep repeating that shot over and over again. And you can zoom in much tighter if you want on things that are more difficult to track. So yeah, so that is how you can accomplish an interview very, very quickly with tracking and without tracking. And you can see that it's very, very easy and very simple to get going. Thank you very much.